Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this TAPS webinar. We're going to be speaking today on new traditions and tips for the holidays. Some housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is going to be recorded and made available in some format after the webinar. Also, we ask that you keep your phone on mute. There is a chat box on this GoToMeeting platform, and you can chat your question in there. We'll read it at the end, and it'll be addressed. So again, please keep your phone on mute, and we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Zanita Galino. I am the Director of Community-Based Care and Professional Education for TAPS. I'm excited to introduce to you Michelle Palmer. She is the Executive Director at the Went Center for Loss and Healing. It's a mental health agency specializing in issues related to grief, loss, and trauma right here in Washington, D.C. They're a very strong community partner of ours. Ms. Palmer has been living and working in the District of Columbia for 15 years. Prior to serving as the Executive Director, Ms. Palmer worked for Medicines Sans Frontieres, Doctors Without Borders in Zimbabwe, Africa, where she developed a sexual and gender-based violence response unit in the Midlands province that was then replicated throughout Zimbabwe. Ms. Palmer's professional areas of expertise include HIV and AIDS, grief, loss, and trauma. She received her master's degree in social work from the University of Vermont and is a licensed independent clinical social worker in the District of Columbia. Again, as a reminder, please keep your phones and your computers muted during the presentation to preserve the integrity of it for those that are participating, but also for our recording. I would like to turn the time over now to Michelle and welcome her for this webinar.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Zanita. As Zanita said, I am Michelle Palmer, and I'm the Executive Director of the One Center for Loss and Healing. This presentation is about managing the holidays, and while also maybe grieving the loss of someone or something, which often is very, very difficult and complicated for people because this time of year there is an expectation of joy and merriment and, frankly, some pressure to be joy and merry when you're not. And so we talk a lot about this at the One Center, and we actually host workshops during this time of year because it is such a difficult time of year for many, many people. So we are going to go through and talk about grief and loss and navigating through the holidays. All right. Anita, if you want to, thank you. All right, so I want to make sure that we all have a baseline of what we're talking about. Because people say grief and loss as though it's one word, and it is not. Loss is the absence of something cherished, and I think that really is, the difficult nature of this time of year for people, regardless of the nature of the loss. I'm seeing that it's hard to hear me, so we're going to go this way. Regardless of the nature of the loss, if it is something that is cherished, this time of year does tend to make it more difficult. Grief is the very normal response to loss or death. I want to point out normal because particularly when people are acutely grieving a loss, they really do feel like they're crazy. I think probably as a grief therapist, the thing I say most to people is, you are not going crazy. You are not crazy. This is a very normal response to a significant loss. And then complicated grief is acute grief that becomes a chronic condition. And we really think about complicated grief at the One Center in terms of both the nature of the loss. So was it, let's say, was it a death by homicide or suicide, which can complicate that grief? Or is it the relationship? And so is it, the death of a child or a spouse that can complicate that grief experience? We also think about it in the context of how is it impacting people's day-to-day ability to function. And when we see sort of when we're rounding around month 3 to 4, and daily functioning, just basic daily functioning, is still being acutely impacted, we start to think about that person's grief process as a complicated grief process. And frankly, most of us, or many of us, have what we call sort of that natural support network to sort of get us through difficult times in our lives, including when we're grieving the loss of someone or something. We at the One Center often see people whose experience is not what we would consider a normative grief experience. Their experience is what we would consider a complicated grief experience, and therefore in the need for some professional help, some help beyond what family and friends can provide. Okay, so there are some common reactions to grief. As human beings, we actually have patterns of reactions, which again I think is actually frankly really helpful because it normalizes people's grief experience. And I think, again, that whole "you're not crazy," I think normalizing that is really, really important. So these are just some common reactions. I put this slide up because, again, I want to help folks sort of recognize the normality of this, that there is going to be an increase in sadness and negativity and anxiety. The desire to withdraw from friends and family is very, very, very normal. Depleted energy is very normal, and we're going to actually talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. Being easily agitated, I hear that a lot from parents, and this deep sense of guilt that they have that they're losing their temper either more frequently or more easily. So not only are they grieving, but now they're grieving and they're feeling guilty. Being easily agitated is a very normal experience of grief. You'll also see this in teenagers and kids, that their capacity to tolerate things that perhaps prior to that loss they were able to tolerate is compromised for a little while. Again, very, very normal. Physical symptoms, we're going to talk a little bit about that later. We see that a lot in kids. Their grief does tend often to manifest itself physically. Substance use, we're also going to talk about that later because there's lots of sort of drinking and sharing of things, mood-altering things during the holidays that can have some pretty significant consequences. But it's also sort of a very normative experience to reflect back on one's losses, the changes, memories, and looking for the hope for the future. You know, we as human beings are resilient creatures, and part of that resiliency, the way that it manifests itself, is really thinking about how do I find hope for my future or for the future of my family. All right, so common reaction to kids in kids and teens. I wanted to put this slide up because I think some people think that children are kind of just like grown-ups in littler bodies, and that's not true. Their brain development directly impacts how they experience grief. And teens are the same exact thing. And with teens, it's not only brain development, but let's get wonky and add hormone changes, and teens can really struggle when they're grieving the loss of someone or something. And you'll see lots of cross-pollination between sort of the common reactions in adults versus children and teens. One of the things that I want to highlight that happens frequently, particularly with younger kids, are the second and the third bullet point, the feeling of responsibility and guilt about the loss. It is a very normal developmental sort of experience to engage in something called magical thinking. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Joan Didion. Joan Didion wrote a book called The Year of Magical Thinking that actually sort of chronicles her life the year after her husband died very suddenly and unexpectedly. But we often talk about magical thinking in the context of young kids, and that's because of their brain development and just sort of their social and emotional development. They do feel, they sort of, because of, I think probably 10 and under, feel a bit like they're the center of the universe and they have a lot of power. And so if that thinking is sort of, you take it to, I have a lot of power and my dad died, it's where is my responsibility about my dad dying because I have power. That is called magical thinking. And we do it as adults, but it's more pronounced, if you will, with kids typically 10 and under. The same goes for a heightened anxiety over the safety of other family members. It is very much like if you've ever seen The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy pulls back the curtain and exposes the wizard. That's very much what loss is like, particularly a first loss. It is this understanding, this difficult and almost visceral understanding that I can lose other people. I lost this person, I can lose other people. And if we're talking particularly in the context of a parent and we're talking about children, it's I have to protect mommy or I have to protect daddy because if something happens to them, who's going to take care of me? So those are sort of the nuances for kids. I want to talk just a little bit about adolescents. I talk to a fair bit of parents and caregivers who feel quite rejected when their adolescents don't want to spend time with the family following a significant loss. And what I say to them is, congratulations, you are on point raising an adolescent who is on point with their development. The single most important group of people to adolescents are their friends. So it is very, very, very normal for teenagers to not want to be with family, but to want to be with friends. It helps them feel more quote unquote normal. So if you're the parent or caregiver of an adolescent and they want to spend time with their friends, try not to take it personally. The other tricky bit about this, though, is that adolescence is really a time of experimentation. And so it's a time of experimentation with all sorts of things, including drinking and smoking and drugs and sex. And as difficult as it is for many parents to engage their adolescents in that conversation, it's an important one to have, particularly in the context of grief and loss, because you want to make sure that your teenagers understand that it is very normal to want to not feel this pain and to look for ways to numb this pain. But numbing this pain doesn't make the pain go away, and it can have pretty significant consequences. So again, just thinking through how are you going to engage in that very explicit conversation. The other one I want to point out, the other bullet point, is trying to avoid euphemisms. This is particularly true for younger kids. Teenagers, they understand the complicated, sort of more complex nuances around language. So they get that when you say somebody went to heaven, they get that heaven is, this sort of larger space that we can't see or feel or touch. It's just something we believe in or we don't. Little kids think heaven is the same exact thing as McDonald's. It is a place you go and a place you come back from. And so you want to try as much as possible to use those words, as difficult as it is, died, dead. It's also important because you are inviting the language of loss into your home for your kids. And that's important because we want to make sure that our kids, no matter how old they are, feel like they can talk about their, whoever it was perhaps that died or that they've lost. We hear a lot at the Lunch Center. We run a grief camp, and a lot of the kids tell us that they don't talk about it at their feelings at home, or they don't bring up the deceased loved one because they're trying to protect their parent or caregiver. So, so inviting a conversation about loss is actually a real gift to give to your kids. Okay, Zenita, thank you. All right, so what's normal in terms of the holidays? I mean, really anything goes. It is very normal to feel a heightened sense of grief and loss during this season, regardless of how long ago your loss was. It just sort of brings up, you know, those times when you're with family and friends also tend to highlight those who are absent. And so it's really, really normal. For example, my aunt, who is my mom's identical twin, died of breast cancer 25 years ago. And I don't think a Christmas has gone by without my mom crying and missing her sister. It's just a normal experience, and it's okay. Give yourself permission to feel that. Don't be embarrassed. Don't try and shrug it off and say, oh, well, it happened so long ago, I should. We hear so many shoulds. I should feel this way or that way or be over it by now. No, there is no how you should feel. You feel how you feel, and that's okay. Give yourself permission to feel that. And also give yourself permission to think about and talk about the people or person that is not at the celebration that normally is. Again, it invites that conversation of loss and maybe death or more globally loss. And it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity for you to rethink some family traditions and maybe create some traditions to help your family sort of cope with and honor the person who you've lost. So this is actually a direct quote from a woman. Her name obviously is not Dana. She was a client at the One Center, and her 3-year-old son died of an asthma attack. And it's just, you know, I think it just so perfectly sort of encapsulates what people feel like. So for those of you who can't see it, I have to put on a happy face and pretend that I'm okay. But I can't forget the fact that Thanksgiving is about family and Christmas is about children. After the death of my son, how can I ever be happy and merry about the holidays again? So here are some things that are very specific to sort of holidays. So holidays are often stressful, period. When you are navigating holidays and loss, that can be particularly stressful. So, you know, again, I think just broadly during the holidays, there are more opportunities for conflicts, misunderstandings, and hurt feelings. You know, my mom gave very strict instructions this Thanksgiving that there will be no conversation about politics at our table, because there will be a conflict. There will be multiple conflicts. So this idea of just sort of knowing that perhaps can happen, and really thinking about how do you show your family, your loved ones, yourself grace, and, you know, circle back and say, hey, you know what? Not my best moment. Or, hey, you know what? Not my best day. You know, I'm sorry. At the end of the day, I love you, and I'm sorry something went sideways. You know, so family dynamics is particularly impacted when we are talking about a child or a parent. And as I talked about, you know, sort of those commonalities in grieving, we all do grieve very uniquely. You know, there's a manifestation of that grief that shows up in very unique ways. And so again, as you think about yourself, your loved ones, understand that they're going to be having their experience that may not look the same as yours, and that is okay. I also want to highlight the traditions piece, and we're going to talk actually a lot about this, because traditions first of all, that is what our holidays are steeped in, is, family tradition, religious tradition, cultural tradition. And those are impacted when we lose someone, when a family system loses someone. So we're going to actually talk about how to change traditions, how to add traditions. At the end of this presentation, I talk about, some ideas for new traditions or for new rituals. Ritual is so very important during the holidays. And the last thing I really want to highlight are sights, sounds, and smells. So our memory lives in something, a part of our brain called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is actually part of our limbic system, which is that it's sort of an automatic response system. And so what happens there is that because it's an automatic, it's not a thinking system where our hippocampus lives, our senses often are what trigger our memories. And so just be mindful that there may be smells that trigger a memory and trigger a painful, maybe a happy memory, but that feels particularly painful this time of year. Same thing with sights and sounds. It's all, so be aware, be mindful that might happen. So there are also uniquely physical demands that happen during the holidays, and they manifest themselves in different ways. So many, many, many people, myself and my nieces included, typically get some sort of a cold during Christmas. It's because we're not getting as much sleep as we normally do. It's because we're not eating as healthily as we normally do. And that, frankly, impacts our immune system. And so we're more open to catching a cold or, the flu. The other part of sort of our ability to catch something, a cold, a flu, whatever it is many people are shopping in very, very busy department stores where thousands, if not millions of people have touched things who also may be, battling a cold or a flu. So be mindful, carry that Purell with you. Just be very vigilant about putting it on. The last thing you want to do when you're already feeling not great during the holidays is to physically not feel great during the holidays. One of the things that you can do is be mindful of what you're eating and try and get sleep. It's really, really important. Sleep is the way that our body literally every single day reboots itself. And so if you are not sleeping well, there are all sorts of negative consequences associated with that. And then the other sort of specific trigger that people feel, I think, more acutely, I think finances are, a stressor for everybody, except they're felt more acutely. And so not having enough money for, let's say, the gift that your child desperately wants, or the ability to go visit a family member who you feel desperate that you need to go see, but you just don't have the money. So there are lots of sort of, I think, stressors specifically associated with finances, and frankly, just sort of the consumerism of this time of year. It's, we are, consumers of all things, and so I think that also puts a lot of pressure and stress, particularly if you're already stressed about finances and you're already stressed about losing someone. So here are some common reactions to grief and loss around the holidays. So one of them is, and you'll see, we have the first three are increased something. So it's increased sadness. It's not that you don't come into the season sad. You do. It's an increase in that. It's feeling it perhaps more acutely. Same with negativity. Same with anxiety. Same with sort of, you're more easily agitated. The sort of the desire to withdraw from friends and family because it's difficult, because it highlights the loss. I can tell you that we try and tell people to surround themselves with friends and family who they feel can support them and who they feel they can tell what support looks like for them. The other very common is, that substance use that I talked about. It is very normal for us to want to somehow numb or at least dull the pain. And so people do all sorts of things to do that. They use drugs, they use alcohol, they use sex, they use food, they use shopping. Be very, very mindful, that whatever it is that you're engaging in is really only a temporary relief. And I will tell you that many people don't know, but alcohol is a depressant. And so while you may feel better in that moment, when you sober up, you will feel sadder, likely, than you did before you went sort of on a drinking bender. And that's because alcohol is a depressant. So just, again, be very mindful of sort of your substance use and abuse, because the last thing that you want to have happen is you come out of a grief process addicted to something, because now you've got a whole nother host of issues. Now, conversely, the other thing that is very normal around the holidays, and I think brings up both, I think, positive and negative, is this reflection. And sometimes it's the reflection around change and death and loss, but sometimes it's reflection around gratitude, and sometimes it's reflection around memories, and sometimes it's reflection around the future. You know what, I actually think the hopes for the future, that's specifically around New Year's. What is your New Year's resolution going to look like? That is, when we ask people that, what we're asking really is, what is your hope for the future? All right, so one of the things that you can do, because there's a lot of things, I just went through a lot of things that are very much out of our control related to the holidays. But there are some things that are in our control. And we at the One Center sort of, this is our mantra, plan ahead. Plan ahead. This slide, I strongly recommend you sort of use this slide as a guide for you to prepare for the holidays. I think what's the most difficult, the holidays are the most difficult for people who haven't planned ahead, who sort of go into the holidays almost naively thinking it's Christmas or it's, Hanukkah, or it's whatever holiday you celebrate. And they go in thinking it's going to feel like last year's holiday or the year before that, and it's not. Things have changed. And so it feels, people have sort of tell us, I felt blindsided by not being prepared. I felt blindsided by my sudden sadness. I felt blindsided by my desire not to be with my family. And so this is, I think, a great guide in how to think about planning ahead. All right, so performing at your ability. You don't have to be happy. You don't have to be merry, and that is okay. There is no I should, and we hear this particularly from parents of young children. I should, be happy for my kids so that they can have a happy whatever the holiday is. There is no should, and if we go back and we think about that slide before, so let's plan for, what if I'm not able to show up and be happy and merry for my kids? Can I tap a friend who can come and help celebrate with us? Can I tap a family member? So I'm not saying sit there and be glum and, help your kids have a miserable holiday, but I am saying you need to show yourself some grace, and you need to think ahead so that you can sort of take a little bit of the pressure off. Ask for help. So that's that whole thing, what I was just talking about with the little kids. Ask those around you for help. And, I mean, it's shopping, it's cooking. Those are the obvious things, but ask for help emotionally. Let people know what you need, and we're going to talk about this in a minute on another slide. But we hear a lot at the One Center, well, it's the holidays. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to blah. And so there's a million reasons why people don't ask for help. That's actually, it's actually opposite of what friends and family actually want. They want to help. 9 times out of 10, your friends and your family want to help. They're just not sure how to. And so if you can give them a little bit of guidance on what help looks like for you during the holidays, they will not only gladly do it, but they will feel honored to do it most times. All right, this is the communication side. People are not mind readers, so you need to let them know how you're feeling. And you also have every right to say, this is how I'm feeling at this minute. It could change in the next minute, and that's just part of, my navigation through these holidays. So please be patient with me. Please show me grace. I'm going to try and show myself grace. But these are some of the things that I was thinking about when I think about sort of what do people struggle with? What do grieving people struggle with during the holidays? And it's like, do you need company or do you need time to yourself? Do you want people to ask how you're doing, or do you not want to have people ask how you're doing? Do you have to put on a happy face because you have new people introduced during the holiday? All of these things are things that you can let your friends and family know ahead of time. Here's what I'm thinking. And that second bullet, that second slide, be careful of that one. There is often a tendency to want to isolate yourself because the idea of facing people during the holidays is too difficult, it's too exhausting, it's too something. I'm not saying you have to go and spend 7 hours at Aunt Sally's house, or that you have to go to the company Christmas or holiday party. But what I am saying is that maybe you do need to go to the holiday party for 30 minutes. Maybe you do need to spend 30 minutes at Aunt Sally's house. You want to try and resist the temptation to isolate yourself. So sort of as I was saying, that that variance, it can, how you feel can change minute by minute, and that's absolutely okay. And it's around communication. You can let friends and family know, I heard a song and I'm sorry, it brought up, this memory for me, and I'm having a difficult time just sort of moving through this moment. And that's really, really okay. You need to be gentle with yourself. Again, I keep coming up on this issue of sort of gentle and showing yourself and others grace. It really is. This is a difficult time of year, and so it's all the more reason that you need to be showing both yourself and your friends and family some grace. And you get to leave out certain rituals if they're too hard, and it's okay. And maybe you think about leaving them out maybe for this year, and maybe you think that, and maybe that makes it easier. Maybe you're not getting rid of it altogether, but it's, as my brother says, it's a game time decision. So maybe this year you leave it out, but next year you integrate it back in, or maybe you don't, and maybe you create something brand new to do, or maybe you do a hybrid. But it is okay to leave out certain rituals around the holiday that are particularly triggering or emotionally difficult. So here are some ideas for new sort of rituals or traditions. The first one is, the first bullet is the first because it is my favorite. Introducing a new dish to your family's holiday table, either a favorite food of the person that you're missing, or using a recipe of your loved one. So as I said, my aunt died 25 years ago, and she died of breast cancer, and she knew she was dying. And so one of the greatest gifts that I've ever received was she and my mom compiled she was an amazing cook, compiled all of her favorite recipes and made cookbooks for all of us, for to all of her nieces and nephews and kids. And it is my go-to, and it is introducing that food. We now cook my aunt's spaghetti sauce every my family. So the new tradition that we introduced when Jeannie, the year after Jeannie died, was we make her homemade pasta sauce every single year. And it's sort of a family thing because we all sort of chop and bake and cook it together, and it's just sort of something special and fun that we do to honor her. Or you can volunteer or give a donation to a nonprofit that either represents them. So oftentimes we're talking about if somebody died of breast cancer, you're giving to Susan G. Komen or something like that. Or was it a particular issue? So my grandmother used to feed the homeless. And so when she died, we donated money, our family donated money to a soup kitchen because it was just an issue that she felt passionate about. I have a friend from college whose nephew died very unexpectedly when he was 7. And so every year Booker asks all of us to on this one day to do random acts of kindness. And it's just such a nice thing. We don't do it around the holidays. We do it actually on his birthday. But it is such a nice thing. And maybe one of those traditions is maybe on Christmas Eve or the day after Christmas or whatever it is that you commit to doing random acts of kindness, and then you share it with each other. You know, that always makes people. It feels good to help people feel good. Choose a favorite song. You can light a candle. You can, place a decorated box or a basket. One of the things that, we do a lot here is we create memory boxes, and we do this a lot with kids. And we invite kids to just write memories on strips of paper, and they stay in that very, that cherished box. And so that might be something you want to do. Allow kids and teens to be part of the process of remembering. A lot of times people think that, we don't want to bring it up because it's going to make the kids too sad. The kids are already sad, so bringing it up is not going to make them sadder. Including them in the memories and thinking about remembering, that's really important. It helps keep their loved one alive. We often tell people that death is not the end of a relationship. And so really keeping those memories alive reinforces that death is not the end of any relationship. You can, make a gift, or you can ask your child, do you want to make something for Daddy or Mommy, or should we write a card to Daddy? You're obviously, Daddy's not going to get it, but it's a lovely thing to do with kids. It's an active thing to do with kids, and anything active with kids is a good thing. Or you create a keepsake. Either, let's say it's, every year you're making a new ornament for the Christmas tree. There's lots of different ways that you can create a keepsake, and you can do it every year with your kids that honors their loved one. As I said, we don't have to belabor this. It's healthy to talk about your loved one and to tell stories about them. It's also normal. So as I said earlier, you want to be thoughtful about the people that you invite around you during the holidays. You want to make sure that the folks who are sharing your holiday experience understand that you're struggling, and that they show you grace in that. And so, if you've got particularly sort of demanding family members or friends, they're probably not who you want to be around during the holidays, and that's okay. That is okay. Again, giving yourself permission to take charge of this time of year. Watch out for quick fixes. I already went over this. You don't want to engage in anything that's going to leave you feeling worse in the long run, right? So be mindful if you're engaging in it that it's a quick fix, and frankly can have consequences down the road. So Sheryl Sandberg, whose husband died very unexpectedly, she has begun talking a lot about this idea of practicing gratitude. And it's funny because it's something that we at the One Center have been talking about for years and years, because it is a very, very, very healing practice. So think about practicing gratitude. Is it that you have a gratitude journal that you keep, or do you want to is practicing gratitude a new tradition for your family? So is it something, this is very common in Thanksgiving, is it we're sharing something that we're thankful for, and it doesn't have to be giant. We can be grateful and thankful for very small things, and we can be thankful and grateful for very big things. If you think about that planning ahead, think about what you're grateful for. And when you are grieving, it can feel like I am not grateful for one thing. And so it might take you a little while to think about that one thing that you're grateful for, but I guarantee you it's there. Taking care of yourself first. This is why we put on the flight attendants tell us to put on our oxygen mask first. You really do, and I know that this is a challenge for parents and caregivers, but you really do need to figure out how to take care of yourself so that you can support the other people who need you. So thinking about, what do I need to be able to be nurturing to myself so that I can be nurturing to those other people who need me. And it is so important to know. As Oprah said, this is what I know. You can and will get through it. You can and you will get through it. Will it be pretty? Maybe, maybe not. And that's quite all right. But that knowledge that this too shall pass, you will get through this, is, I think, fundamentally one of the most important sort of mantras that you can say to yourself during the holidays. So this next slide is just sort of the services that we at the One Center provide. And I'm not going to go over it because many of you are not from Washington, D.C., but this is the One Center and this is what we do. And that is my contact information and contact information for the One Center. So that really concludes my webinar. I wanted to make sure that I left about 15 minutes for folks to ask questions.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for this wonderful webinar. I want the folks that are participating to also remember that TAPS is here throughout the holidays. 24/7, you can reach out to us on our National Military Helpline, and just know that we're sending peace your way for the holiday season, whatever that may look like for your family. I'm going to go ahead and read the first question we have. It's, how do we get kids to open up and start a dialogue about their deceased dad? Do you have some tips on that, Michelle?
Yeah, so the best way to do that is modeling. Teenagers, it's very normal if they don't want to talk about their dad. It's quite normal. For teenagers, I think the more explicit conversation is, I just want you to know that I'm here to listen, and I want to know how you feel about losing dad and about life without dad. For littler kids, it really is about modeling. And so it really is, introducing dad into a daily conversation, be it reviewing homework and laughing, oh my God, Dad was so much better at math than I am, I'm sorry. Or, I'm having a sad day, I'm really missing Dad. How about you? And it might take a little while. The other piece is that remember that kids, especially little kids, are trying to protect you. And so also giving little kids explicit permission to talk about Dad. Mommy's okay. Mommy might cry, but you're not making Mommy cry. Mommy likes to hear you talk about Dad. Mommy cries just because she misses Dad like you do. And so really modeling that language and introducing, and you may have to do it more than a couple of times. You may have to sort of doggedly do it. They will eventually open up. Let them do it at their pace.
Have questions? Okay, so as a reminder, we have recorded this. We're going to make it available in electronic format in some way to those that have participated and also those that weren't able to join us today. So that was the last question it looks like we got. So yes, Jim, we will be having that information. Again, we want to thank you, Michelle, and all of you at the Wentz Center. Thank you for the great work you do to support the families that we work with in this area and to present this wonderful information for us. It has been greatly received, and we very much appreciate it. And again, please check our website, folks. We have some wonderful programming we're planning for 2017, great webinars for our military survivor population as well as those that work with them. So please check back, and remember that we're here 24/7 during the holiday. Reach out to us. You don't have to be alone. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Have a great holiday, everybody. Bye-bye.